for the purpose of this experiment, women were randomly assigned to either be ovulating on the random day that the study was going on or not be ovulating on the random day. So there's no reason to expect, on average, any differences between the women who happened to be ovulating that day or the women who weren't, but there were. Let me move on, because there is a whole other theory I need to talk about in the next 10 minutes. Evolutionary perspectives link a wide range of variables. Suddenly, the way we behave in intimate relationships is being connected to the way we've evolved as biological creatures. Well, that's phenomenal. But it does focus more on gender differences than variability within genders, because obviously, you might get the mistaken impression from discussions of evolutionary theory that, oh, all women want the same thing, and all men want the same different thing. Well, that's obviously not true. There's a lot of variability within each gender, a lot. Evolutionary theory doesn't talk about that so much. Evolutionary theory focuses on something very interesting, the extent to which genders are different. But in focusing on that, it tends to overlook or leave out differences between men or between women. How do you explain that? Evolutionary theory doesn't talk about it so much. And evolutionary theory focuses a lot on mate selection in really interesting ways. But on what happens to relationships once they form, well, it doesn't get so far. It tends to say, well, some relationships should be better than others because these relationships, they're meeting adaptive needs. But what about a relationship that starts good and goes bad? It doesn't have quite as much to say. It's not silent, but it doesn't have as much to say. Well, then let me move on to another theory, equally interesting, and I'm going to spend a lot less time on it. I'm sorry about that. Attachment theory. Attachment theory also goes back in time, also says the source of our current adult intimate relationships lies in the past. Let's look into the past. But, whereas the evolutionary theory says, let's look into our ancestral evolutionary past, attachment theory says, let's look into our personal history. Let's look into the relationships that we all had as infants. And the premise of attachment theory is that the nature of the bonds that we form with our primary caregivers in infancy shapes the relationships that we have throughout our lives. And the guy who said this first was a fellow named John Bowlby. And John Bowlby said, look, yes, John Bowlby was an evolutionary theorist, totally. He believed in evolution. He believed that we all evolved. But when he looked back he was looking at monkeys and our primate ancestors. He said, you know what we have in common with our primate ancestors is that we will not survive if we don't have a relationship with our parents. Like, you know, if you're a fish and you're born, you just say, well, you don't even have to say hi to your mom and dad. You're just off. But human beings are helpless when they emerge from the womb. When my son finally emerges, he'll be totally helpless. He'll be dependent on us. So he said it makes sense that human beings would have evolved mechanisms to make sure that parents will stick around and take care of that kid. So he said, we've evolved a system, an attachment system, a system for developing attachments between infants and their parents. Which answers the question, why are babies so cute? Babies have evolved to be cute so that we'll stick around and watch them, even though it's 2 in the morning and we're tired and we'd rather sleep. Why did babies don't have to learn how to cry. They're born knowing how to cry. Why is that useful? It's useful because that cry gets attention from the people who are attached to them so that they will get care. Attachment is necessary for the survival of a species. It does a couple things for the baby. One is it provides a secure base. If babies are attached to their parents, then it's safe to explore because you know your parents are going to grab you before you go off the cliff. In fact, one of the classic studies of the secure base is they brought babies to a room which had a floor and then a pit, a deep pit covered with a layer of glass. So when the babies are crawling along, they get to the edge, it looks like a pit. What should they do down there? Now, in fact, it's covered with glass, so they could cross over it and basically walk out over the pit, but it does look a little odd. So what happens is babies who are securely attached will use their parent as a source of information. And what happens is the babies who like their moms will look back and look at mom. And the moms had been instructed, some of them, to smile. And when the mom smiled, the babies walked right out over the pit. That's okay, there were glass over the pit. But when the moms were going, then the babies shied away. Like, oh, I learned something from mom. Don't go over pits. Well, that's how, you imagine, that's how things function. That's how babies learn, and it's adaptive. That we should have evolved a system that connects babies to their caregivers so that they can explore the world and learn about the world. What Bowlby said is, from those interactions, we develop what he called mental models. Mental ideas about relationships in the world. We develop an expectation for care. We learn, are people going to take care of me, or am I on my own here? That first relationship teaches us the answer to that question. Well, a woman named Mary Ainsworth said, how many kinds of I'd like to know what kind of mental models there are. So she developed a research paradigm called the strange situation. And the strange situation was a situation where she got babies and their primary caregivers, in this case was all moms, to come to the lab, play in a room, and what she had, the strange situation was simply that after the mom and the kid were playing in the room for a while, the kid was like 18 months old, a stranger would come in, a research assistant, start talking to the baby, and then the mom would slip out. And through the one-way mirror, the researchers would observe what would the baby do when they discovered the mom is gone. And then the mom would come right back in, and the question is, what does the baby do when the mom comes back in? That's the strange situation. And what they found was 3 different styles of responses to this situation. Half of the kids demonstrated a pattern of behavior that they called secure attachment. In secure attachment, what happened is the kids were exploring the room. They knew mom was there. They didn't have to stare at mom. But when mom slipped out and they discovered it, they started to cry. Where's mom? Then mom came back. They hugged mom like, oh, mom, thanks, you're back. And they were fine. Securely attached kids wanted mom around and were soothed when she returned. But the other 2, about 25% each, fell into 2 other categories. There was this avoidant group. The avoidant group ignored mom, didn't notice when she left, didn't care when she returned. In contrast, the anxious ambivalent group, kind of my favorite group because they're so poignant. The anxious ambivalent group, when they discovered mom was gone, they didn't want to leave mom. They're reluctant to explore the room in the first place. When mom finally slips out, they freak out. And when mom comes back, they're mad at mom for leaving. So, Mary Ainsworth and her students said, maybe there are different styles, different mental models that people develop in intimacy that we're going to call different attachment styles, secure, avoidant, and anxious. And these are responses to different kinds of parenting. If your parent is dependable, you know your parent is going to be there, you develop a secure attachment style. If you know your parent's not there, you develop an avoidant attachment style. And if your parent is unreliable, you develop an anxious ambivalent attachment style. Well, people did this research in kids. It's very interesting. And then 2 researchers of adults said, well, wait a minute. They went back and read Bowlby, and Bowlby said, hey, these mental models last your whole life. You use these mental models when you develop new intimate relationships in adulthood. And so 2 researchers named Phil Shaver and Cindy Hazan said, well, wait a minute. Then we should see commonalities between infant-parent attachment and adult attachment. And they started asking themselves some questions. Let me ask you the same questions. In what kind of relationships is it okay to talk baby talk? Parents and children, people in love, right? If you hear me talking to someone, oh yeah, honey, sweetie baby. Who am I talking to? My wife or my kid? Maybe both. What kind of relationships do you find people gazing moonily into each other's eyes? Lovers and parents and kids. Who's it comfortable to cuddle with? Your lover and your kid. Sometimes at the same time. So the idea is that they're saying maybe it's the same mechanism. Maybe it's the same evolved system that governs our attachments in infancy and our attachments in adulthood. And if that's true, then if these are the styles of infant attachment, there should be the same styles in adult attachment. So, to study that, they put a quiz in the newspaper, and it looked like this. They put 3 paragraphs in the newspaper, and they asked people, circle the one that describes you. Let's read them quickly. First one, I find it relatively easy to get close to others and comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't often worry about being abandoned. Who's that? Secure. How many of you is that? I mean, don't raise your hand. But good for you. How about this one? I'm uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them, to allow myself to depend on them. I'm nervous when people get too close. Which one is that? Avoidant. We're talking about adults here. How about this one? I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I worry my partner doesn't really love me, won't want to stay with me. I want to merge completely with someone, and this desire scares people away. Anxious ambivalent, of course. Well, by the way, I just love anxious ambivalent. Because anxious ambivalent is saying, I'm so mad at you for not being perfect. I'm so mad at you for not loving me enough. I wish you loved me more, and I hate you for that. So here's the point. The point is, what they found was 50%, 25, 25. The same proportions. Kind of interesting. I'm going to skip this slide. It's all in the text. I'm going to go right to this. What does attachment theory explain? What does attachment theory explain? Well, attachment theory has been used to explain some very interesting and important things. Hey, where do our standards for intimacy come from? Why do some people want to be really close? Why are some people perfectly comfortable kind of being more solitary or with a more distant? Like, some people will say, you know, the problem with this person is I can't breathe. We don't have any independence. Other people say, no, the problem is this person doesn't want me close enough. What's the difference? This says these differences arise in childhood, in infancy, when we develop our models of what attachment, what intimacy is all about. And then why do some people have the same, don't you know people who have the same relationships over and over again? Every time is the same problem. Why? Well, what Bowlby says is we have these mental models, these attachment styles, and we bring them with us. And we